Today on the Open Minds UFO Report, the Welsh government replies to UFO questions in Klingon, UFO sighting reports doubled in June, and a New Jersey witness describes a black triangle behind hovering lights. Your Open Minds UFO Report starts now. Hello and welcome to the Open Minds UFO Report. My name is Alejandro Rojas. A Welsh Assembly minister recently asked the Welsh government 3 questions about UFO sightings and how the Welsh government handles them. The Welsh government replied in the make-believe Star Trek language of Klingon. Minister Darren Millar, a conservative in the Welsh Assembly for Clwyd West, submitted 3 questions to the Minister of Economy, Science and Transport. He asked, will the minister make a statement on how many reports of unidentified flying objects there have been at Cardiff Airport since its acquisition by the Welsh government? What discussions has the Welsh government had with the Ministry of Defence regarding sightings of unidentified flying objects in Wales in each of the past 5 years? And what consideration has the Welsh government given to the finding of research into sightings of unidentified flying objects in Wales? According to Wales Online, the Welsh government replied in Klingon. Translated from Klingon, their statement reads, "The minister will reply in due course. However, this is a non-devolved matter." A full answer is expected by July 15. BBC News says it is believed to be the first time the Welsh government has chosen to communicate in Klingon. To add insult to injury, or perhaps insult to insult, an Assembly source said the only extraterrestrial life seen near Cardiff recently seems to be Darren Millar. Perhaps instead of spending time wasting government resources asking questions about UFOs, he should be fighting for very real concerns of his constituents. In defense of Millar, a Tory spokesman was quoted as replying that Millar had tabled the question after being contacted by constituents. UK papers are filled with UFO stories, and taking a look at the daily UFO headlines, which we post regularly, it can be seen that most of the mainstream media articles covering UFO stories lately come from the UK. In fact, according to a Huffington Post article in 2012, a poll of residents in the UK found that 52% believe UFO evidence has been covered up because widespread knowledge of their existence would threaten government stability. Ridiculing the UFO subject is nothing new when it comes to the UK government. Nick Pope, who worked at the UFO desk for the UK Ministry of Defence from 1991 to 1994, tweeted, "Replying to an assemblyman's question on UFOs in Klingon is a great way to ridicule the subject. I did similar things at the MOD. Kapla." Kapla is another Klingon term and means success. We dialed up Nick Pope on Skype to ask him some further questions about the UK government's use of ridicule when dealing with the UFO subject. In your tweet, you had mentioned that you had done similar things at the MOD. Could you explain that a little more? Why would you do that?
Well, it was the long-standing policy of Her Majesty's government to both downplay the true extent of interest and involvement in UFO investigations, but also to kind of do, I guess, what you call a low-level disparagement on the subject, to do a couple of things. Firstly, to try and dissuade the mainstream media from running stories on this at all, or if we couldn't do that and the story was going to run, to ensure that it ran in such a way that people would just treat the whole subject as a joke. So, for example, the press office would slip into any Ministry of Defence replies phrases such as little green men and UFO spotter. Now, I don't know if that term translates, but it means somebody who takes an obsessive and rather nerdy interest in a subject. So it wasn't exactly a high-level conspiracy and anything too sinister, but it was a sort of low-level background, I suppose, of casting aspersions, putting a little bit of ridicule into the subject, making the whole thing seem trivial and unimportant. And of course, when I was there, that was my job, and I had to play along. I think you've called this spinning dirty tricks before. Yes, I suppose it is just that. It is taking a legitimate inquiry from the media, from parliamentarians, from the public, just twisting it a little bit and sending the whole thing up, making it seem a little bit trivial, a little bit ridiculous.
And you called these legitimate issues. I mean, you guys were, even though you were ridiculing it, taking these reports fairly seriously in the background.
We were taking them very seriously, yes. We had researched and investigated the phenomenon for several decades, and all the time we were telling Parliament, the media, and the public that this subject was of no defense significance, which was our standard soundbite. Behind the scenes, yes, we took it very seriously indeed. We researched, we investigated, we carried out some fairly highly classified intelligence studies, which are only now beginning to see the light of day under the UK's Freedom of Information Act.
Mm-hmm. And do you think the Welsh government then is doing something similar, trying to dissuade attention?
Yes, I do. I think what happened was this. One of the assemblymen asked 3 perfectly legitimate questions about UFOs, probably not as a result of personal interest, but as a result of questions that he was being asked by his constituent. Now, any assemblyman, like any political representative, whether it's in the UK or the US, is really duty-bound. A part of the job is to raise with the government any concerns, issues, questions put by constituents. So really, he was only doing his job. He was asked these questions, and he then in turn put those questions to the Welsh government. The Welsh government decided to send a holding reply, just saying, I will reply in due course, but as a little bit of fun, and maybe as really a very good example of this spin, dirty tricks, trivialization. They made their response, as the world's press now knows, not in English, not even in Welsh, but in the language of Klingon, a specially constructed language, of course, devised for the Star Trek franchise. And by doing this, they totally took attention off the subject of these questions and really made this a story which has literally gone around the world. I mean, today, as we speak, I see it's gone up on CNN. So it's beginning to hit now, not just the UK's media, but the mainstream media in the United States.
So, and if I remember correctly, I mean, are you expecting there to be some interesting response when we do get a full response? Because if I do remember correctly, there are some great cases in the area.
There are, but I think there's the constitutional question of whether this is an issue that has been devolved to the Welsh government, or whether it remains a defence issue that will be the responsibility of the Ministry of Defence still. So I would not be surprised when the response to these questions are actually published in full, and hopefully not in Klingon, by the way. But I would not be surprised if the response was simply to say that this is a matter for the Ministry of Defence. So there's a lot, with these sorts of questions, there's a lot of kind of batting them around between government departments, with everyone trying to palm it off on somebody else. That's standard practice, not just with UFOs, but with all sorts of things in government. And I played that game myself for 21 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, you used some Klingon in your tweet, so if they do respond in Klingon, maybe you'll be able to translate some of it.
Well, I'm not sure about this, but I before this interview, figured that you might ask me to do at least one thing in Klingon. So with apologies to any Star Trek fans for mangling the pronunciation, but kapla!
All right, great. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Each month, the Mutual UFO Network, also known as MUFON, sends out its UFO sightings report figures, and the June report showed a drastic increase in UFO reports. MUFON is the largest civilian UFO organization in the country and perhaps the world. They have certified investigators throughout the country who investigate reports in their local areas. They even have a few investigators in other countries. The majority of their investigators and reports are in the U.S. Each month they receive on average anywhere from 400 to 700 U.S. reports. Last year alone, they received over 7,000. Many of these turn out to be cases of mistaken identity. However, a small percentage, anywhere between 10 to 20%, remain unidentified when matched up to natural phenomena, man-made objects, celestial objects, or other mundane objects. It isn't surprising to see modest spikes in the number of sightings. What is not normal is to see a month have double the amount of sightings that are normally reported. In 2014, MUFON received 601 UFO sighting reports in June. This June, they received 1,179, nearly double last year. The question is, why was there an increase? Are there more UFOs flying around, or could there be another reason? Running the numbers by state up against the numbers from last year doesn't show a state that had vastly more sightings than others. The report seems well spread out, so it doesn't seem like UFOs are on the increase in one particular area. I asked Roger Marsh what he thinks. He writes for OpenMinds.tv and is also the Director of Communications for MUFON. He said at MUFON headquarters they have a pretty good idea why there was an increase. He said, "We feel it was directly related to the final 2 episodes of Season 2 of Hangar 1, the UFO Files." Hangar 1 is a History Channel UFO program produced by Go Lucky Productions. The final 2 episodes played in June. It features MUFON reports, and the name comes from a hangar that once served as a storage area for MUFON files. Marsh says, "The cases for both of these episodes were pulled from our more current content management system, also known as the CMS, which includes great cases that were well investigated and closed as unknowns. Most of these incredible cases have never been featured in any media format before, especially not on television." Marsh's theory is that people watching the program were reminded of their own sightings, prompting them to log on to MUFON's website and fill out reports. Marsh says a look at the reports supports this theory. Marsh explained, "A very high percentage of the June UFO report surge was historical cases. People were watching our show and decided they finally discovered a place where they could report their encounter. Some of these are very, very interesting and compelling cases currently under investigation." Marsh says both seasons of Hangar 1 can be seen at the History Channel website. MUFON is currently in discussions with Go Lucky Productions for a possible 3rd season. As usual, July 4th brings in a slew of UFO reports. One of the most interesting is from a New Jersey witness at Pompton Plains who reported watching and photographing a black triangle-shaped UFO with an orange light at each point. He reported his sighting and sent his images to the MUFON Witness Reporting Database. The witness and a few friends were outside in a backyard watching fireworks when the object was first seen on July 4th, 2015. The witnesses say they saw 3 orbs of light in a triangular formation. They thought they might be fireworks, but after a few minutes of not moving, fading out, or flickering, they thought it was a bit odd. They also say the lights remained in formation. The witness also noted that the neighborhood seemed strangely quiet at the time. He says they have a lot of little yippy dogs in the area, but none of them were barking. The group wondered what the object might be. The witness wrote, "Stars, planets, and satellites were ruled out for how bright they were and close they seemed. The ones of us without glasses were able to see a black triangle behind them also. It was very dark. The object appeared to be about half a mile up, near the height of a Cessna plane, maybe at an angle of 45 degrees about a street over. It looked to be about twice as long as your standard Cessna plane also. It was very hard to see any more detail than that." He continued, "It was not moving, just hovering there for a good bit, almost in the exact center of all the parties lighting off fireworks, like it had come to investigate. It just sat there like that while we debated amongst one another what we were looking at. Grabbed our phones and taking several pictures in which you can see the lights." The witness wondered if the object could have been military. He wrote, "Being that the ISIS warnings were up for the holiday and all that, we thought maybe it was a military plane checking on things again as we are that close to NYC. Then as silently and quickly as it showed up over the area, it was gone. It almost looked as if someone had just shut lights off on the orbs more than they zoomed away. Basically just vanished. We stared at the skies for a little longer to see if we could gain sight of it, but it was nowhere. I still am rather excited and have been staring at the photos since then, talking to other stargazers to see if anyone else saw it, knew what it may be, etc., before reaching out to MUFON." That's your Open Minds UFO report for today. You can find these stories and more at openminds.tv. We post fresh UFO news daily. You can also follow us on Twitter at Open Minds TV, and you can find us on Facebook. Don't forget to register for the International UFO Congress, the Guinness World Record holding largest UFO convention. Early registration is open now, so reserve your spot at the lowest price available all year at ufocongress.com. Let us know if you enjoyed today's episode by liking the episode on YouTube and leaving us your comments in the section below. You can also download our podcast, Open Minds UFO Radio, on iTunes or at openminds.tv/radio. Thanks again for joining us today for OpenMinds.tv. I'm Alejandro Rojas.